This is the 21.5 Show.
You're on 121.5, the emergency frequency.
Whether you're a professional pilot or want to be one, you're in the right place.
Let's get started.
Join professional aviators Dylan and Max as they talk their experience in the airlines, business aviation, and more.
Life is good.
Industry experts, unique stories, and plenty of fun. This is the 21.5 Show.
Here we go.
We are so excited to once again be joined by a colleague and compensation expert, Dr. Chris Broyhill. Welcome back to the program, Dr. Broyhill.
It's great to be here. And just so you guys know, I'm going to be a little bit relaxed tonight because it's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Good.
The data's flowing, Max.
Yeah, the compensation advice will come more clearly.
That's great. Well, Dr. Broyhill, if folks are not following you on LinkedIn, they should. You're posting a lot of great information out there on your handle. And the other day, you just posted on your profile that the Q3 BLS data has dropped and the AirComp Calculator's databases have been updated. I would argue that, and I'll be curious to get your input, but I would say the kind of right now is the most in demand your salary surveys are, right? Because people are trying to negotiate their raises. And in Q4, is that accurate? And if so, what can you tell us about the new data?
It is. So the hot season for me/us here is about, starts in September, but October is really hot. November is really hot, and December is hot as well. Interestingly, because some companies do their comp reviews right after the calendar year closes, January and February are also pretty hot. So there's 5 months where things are going really hot and heavy. And don't get me wrong, it's not like we're unbusy the rest of the year, but for most, that's the hot season. And that's when most of the work comes through and most requests for access. And then for the deep dive studies I do, most requests for those as well.
All right. Well, what can you tell us about the data? I'd be curious to see now that you've got most of 2024 kind of recorded, maybe a comparison between that and 2023. And what do you got?
Well, so it's pretty interesting. I've got to take some tables pulled up here because I'm a geek, I derive weighted averages for everything. And I'll talk 2 surveys instead of 3. I can't really talk about the IBM Barometer survey because it's restricted. But what I will tell you with the 2 surveys, so the average level of compensation for everybody in a flight department is about $182,367 in 2024 data. And your average pilot is paid, and this goes between chief pilot, senior captain, and first officer is paid about $204,000. Your average maintainer is about $138,000. Your average flight attendant is $132,000, and your average scheduler is about $98,000. But here's the interesting thing: if we go to the percentages over to provide some context, and if people of your listeners have heard me talk about this before, and this is a stat they've heard before, I apologize. But from Q1 of 2023 to Q2 of 2024, Q1 of 2023 to Q1 of 2024, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, it's an average of all private industry compensation that rose 4.1%. So there was wage growth, 4.1%. In business aviation, our average growth rate was 9.7%. So we more than doubled, almost 2.5 times the rate of private industry compensation. The big winners were chief pilots were up about 13%. Captains were up about 8%, about double. Senior captains 7.34%. Maintenance supervisors went up, so that's good. I always am happy when the maintainers get paid a little more money because those folks I think are largely undervalued. And that's this one of the soapboxes I get up on is that, we talk about the pilot shortage, we talk about it almost incessantly, but we don't talk enough about the maintainer shortage because those folks are out there in our society. Gosh darn us, is doing the best it can to talk people out of making a living with their hands. And the world, I don't know how you are but if you get your air conditioning breaks or your electrical system goes out in your house, the person you're going to call up is probably not going to have a college degree, but by gosh, they're going to have skills that are very valuable to you, and you'll pay for a premium for them as well. You should. And we have the same thing in the maintenance world and in our industry. And one of the things that's kind of funny, I may have told the story before. If I do, I apologize. I was on a call where people were saying, our principal doesn't want to pay a higher hourly rate to our maintainers. How do we fix that? I said, that's an easy one. The next time he pulls up to the service desk or where he gets his Porsche fix, ask how much the hourly rate is for those folks.
Yeah.
Because odds are it's higher than what he's paying the people working on his airplane. And that's where we lose a lot of maintainers, because they can say, what? I can work quasi-normal hours and I can get paid more with none of the liability? Is this a trick question? Of course I'll go. And I get to still turn wrenches and do what it is, that makes them, that they enjoy. So, and there is a bit of an exodus in our industry from, for maintainers and that sort of thing. But anyway, maintainers did better. I just thought I'm digressing as I typically do, but maintainers did better from 2023 to 2024. So the data wasn't a surprise. What's happening is you're seeing a lot of personnel. I think one of the stats I pulled out is your average person, your average captain flying one of the bigger, sexier airplanes like a G600 or a G650 or a G700 or a Global 7500. They make about 40 grand more this year than they made last year, because the people that are flying them don't want to see them poached, and they're taking the steps to make sure that doesn't happen.
I remember beforehand you were saying, hey, if you've got somebody with that sexy type rating, you recommend paying in the 75th percentile. Is that still about what you're seeing?
You bet. Because, what's happening, the most disruptive influence in the compensation market is high net worth individuals. Because what will happen is they'll go buy one of these sexy airplanes and they'll say, management company, come on, give me some pilots, give me a maintainer. I want to start flying it. And the management company is going to go, we can't get anybody into that school because the slots are A, extremely expensive, and B, the wait time is incredible. Find me somebody who's already tapped, I'll pay anything. And so they're getting poached at numbers with 3s and 4s in front of them to just show up and fly airplanes. So, and also the maintainers are getting poached, because you get somebody that goes to flight safety, gets checked out, get some experience maintaining the airplane, knows how to troubleshoot it, make all the bells and whistles work, and they are just as valuable commodity as the pilots, and they too get poached. So it's kind of a two-way gotcha.
It's interesting. And I would say Max, that's what we've observed here in our local market too. It's
and the big training backlog is certainly exacerbated all of this.
Okay.
Because if you can't just hire someone you like and, wait 30 days till he goes to training, you don't have many other options if you want to get going.
And if you're going to hire somebody, then you're stuck with paying them before you're even useful to you, which adds another difficulty to the whole equation.
Plus you're married a little bit too, because then you invested all of this money into them, and if it doesn't work out, that you don't get the training back.
No, you don't. And it's funny. There's a thing. So the phenomenon of the training contract is starting to work its way back into normal lore. And I know how we all feel about it. And I'm with you on that. The theory is that, when you should want to stay at the job, you shouldn't have something that locks you in. Although the interesting encounter to provide that some context, if you work at a corporation and you're hired with a signing bonus, if you leave before 2 years, you have to pay part of your signing bonus back. Usually the way it works. If you go to a corporation and they pay for a master's degree for you, or some kind of advanced education program, or they pay for a move, you owe that money to them for 2 years. They expect 2 years of your loyalty to get a return on their investment. So there's a lot of corporations that are saying, well, why is this any different than a master's degree? Why is this any different than a move? And they don't understand, the reluctance of people in our industry to, want to participate in something like that.
Yeah, and the difference too is that my response to that is always, well, it's not training that's required to perform the job function you hired me for. Like getting a master's degree is to build employees for long-term growth and stuff. But
no, it's a two-way sword. Like, so I can see, as somebody used to run a flight department, and had a few people, bail on me after I put them through 2 type ratings, Falcon 2000 and Falcon 7X, and they decide, I don't want to sit here anymore. That we started looking at training contracts, but I got close to implementing them, but I never went the final mile and made people do it for just that reason. I couldn't stomach.
Yeah, I'm the same way, but I say, look, here's the expectation when we send you to school is that you're going to stick around, for whatever, at least a year and see that through. So, and that usually if you set the expectation, I think people are hesitant to break that, verbal agreement because that's the stuff that follows you around in a business that's as small as aviation is.
It does. There are some people who don't take into account that, our industry is as small as it is, yet as big as it is. I mean, it's kind of two-sided. Yeah, we've got a lot of departments out there and there's a lot of places you go work, but generally your reputation will follow you around. Somebody will know, what about this guy or that guy or whatever, or that gal? Your reputation follows you around.
Yeah. And in business aviation, it's so important, as you move through your career.
Yeah.
What's said about you when you're not around? Let's just say that.
So, it's interesting. You're kind of talking about some non-dollar figure stuff, Dr. Broyhill, and I've seen you make some posts. No, I was going to say, I've seen you make some posts recently about leadership. I think you were even doing a study on culture, a survey on culture. So it seems like you're kind of looking into some other avenues. So do you have any information or do you have any thoughts on kind of some of these non-quantifiable things that are in business aviation that you're looking at?
Well, yeah, I do. I mean, so the leadership thing, I've always been kind of a leadership junkie in terms of things that I read and things that I talk about. I am writing in the process with Mike Nichols, who I think the world of, formerly SVP of NBA. He and I are writing a leadership textbook for those. It's for anybody really, but it's targeted specifically for those who are in the CAM program. We are recruiting members of our industry to write chapters for us to give them some, in the trenches kind of mentality. So we've been spending a lot of time in that subject area. But it's just, so what spurred, I wrote a comment about leadership not being a popularity contest. And I know we're in election year and I don't want to get political or anything like that, but I do, some people are not going to vote for somebody, or some people are not going to be a fan of somebody because they don't happen to like them. And whether or not that person is a good leader or not, I just don't like it. And you know what? You're not marrying him, you're not going to be sleeping with him at night. You're not going to be spending 24/7 with him. You'll have to like him. One of the leaders in the Air Force that I respected, or I shouldn't say respected, I was a great, great leader. I didn't really like it. I didn't like him as a person. I didn't like him, as an individual, but he was a spectacular squadron commander and a spectacular leader. I would have followed him into combat because I could count on the decisions that he was going to make. And I've encountered several people like that where you may not like who they are or what they are, but they're effective in their job and they're fair. So there's if people have really extra time on their hands, they need to read The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli. Machiavelli gets a bad rap. He's always pegged as the ends justify the means guy. And that's not really what he says. What he's talking about is he's giving advice. I wish I could remember the exact detail of his position. He's giving advice to the prince. I think the Prince of Florence or the Prince of Milan. I can't remember. Machiavelli has fallen out of his graces, trying to get back into his graces, and he's writing a book of advice for the prince. But one of the most profound elements in there he says is, don't worry about being loved. The leader should not worry about being loved. The leader should worry about being right. Do the right thing. Don't worry about what people think about it. Do the right thing. And yes, we get everything about leadership these days. And part of it is because I grew up in the military where pretty much, during, the Cold War, and I'm a baby boomer, and a lot of people I flew with baby boomers, and obviously we have a different attitude about life. But there was none of this touchy-feely stuff about leadership. It was all about get in there, get the job done, quit your whining. I don't care about your cutie feelings. We're going to do the mission. And I kind of think that our right could use a little more of that. How do you feel about the thing? Oh, if I offended you, if I not talked to you in your certain little style, And don't get me wrong, I do understand that's important. I really do. But sometimes you just got to get the frickin' mission done, folks. And I don't have time to build a communique that's going to slip past your, emotional defenses if I'm going to talk to you. I'm going to tell you, we're going here now, get on board, let's do it. And unfortunately, our society, we just, the advice people get is sometimes so much couched in, emotional baggage that it becomes ineffective. I read stuff on LinkedIn, and there's people giving these 1 or 2 line epithets about leadership's about, and I'm kind of going, it's much more complex than that. You can't sum up what leadership is in a 2 or 3 line post in LinkedIn. You just can't. Another digression there. Sorry.
No, it's excellent. It's such a hot topic right now. The work that I've been doing with some of the committees in MBAA, we're tackling the same things. Because as I've said before, probably on this podcast and definitely through some of the MBA work, is that just because you have a type rating or you're the most senior pilot at a flight department doesn't mean you're a good leader.
Exactly.
But unfortunately, that's the way that it usually works. It's like, oh, well, this guy left for Delta, so I guess you're next, and so I think the real question is, at the end of the day, this is what we've grappled with, is like, can we take someone that doesn't want to be a leader and make them a leader, or or maybe that's not a priority for them, and make them understand the value of trying to become a leader in a flight department? And that's kind of the question now, is like, are these made or are these born, these leaders, and what is the future of that?
Well, sorry, that's a good point. So there's the whole "are leaders born or made" argument, and so my belief is that it's not a question of born or made in the bigger picture. It's a question of what DNA they possess. If you're going to be good in a leadership role, there's certain DNA you have, and I know that's not a biologically correct terminology, but I'm trying to say mental wiring maybe is a better way to put it. There's mental wiring you've got, and somebody who isn't prone to a leadership role doesn't have the mental wiring. If they don't have the mental wiring, you can do whatever you want to try to teach them how to be a leader, and they're not going to get it or be good at it. So this thing, anybody can be a leader. No, they can't. Anybody can be a leader. There are people that are going to be more wired for it and better at it than others. And I think that's it's just kind of a function of the way they're wired. It's like, why do we got pilots, we got fighter pilots. It's all a function of mental wiring. How does that mental wiring work? And the more refined the mental wiring works, the better a pilot you will be. And fighter pilots have very refined mental wiring because they have to do the job they do. And I just think it's all a function of mental wiring. But if somebody doesn't have the mental wiring, if they don't have the DNA, if you will, you could send every leadership course of the book, and they're still going to suck at being a leader because they don't get it. It's like you're speaking a different language. They don't get it, and they won't get it.
All right.
Yeah.
But that being said, too, there's also people that maybe have that, but just need the education and the training to help refine, what they are born with. And that's where, when people are when you get promoted to fly different equipment stuff, you go to training, and, we're identify so well with training as pilots, but then when you get into that management role, there's not customary to send anybody to training.
No, you're right.
So that's where just, I think a lot of pilots too that have leadership are sometimes a little rough around the edges when put in a leadership role. And that's where I think the training can help smooth that off and really turn people that, have the potential to be great leaders into great leaders. So
I agree completely with that. I
we
think
need to look at that. It's just such a different job than flying a jet. And
it is,
No,
I completely agree with that. There's one of the biggest mistakes we make in business aviation is just what you said before. Guy's been here the longest. You looks like you're the new chief pilot. The old one just left. You're the new chief pilot. And it's like, excuse me, any training associated with this? Nope. Get in the office and do the job.
Off you go.
And I'll tell you what's even worse. When I became a director of aviation, I had been a chief pilot before, and I watched my director do his job at Sprint when I was there. And I'm thinking to myself, boy, I could sure do a better job than this guy did. Good. And then I got to be a director of aviation and realized, holy cow, there's a lot of stuff I don't know. I mean, wow. I was just like overwhelmed by all the knowledge I didn't have. And I was thinking, man, I wish I'd been trained for this. I wish somebody had given me information to do this job better. Instead of stumbling my way through, maybe I would have done a little better. I mean, so Yes, training of some sort to bring people up. That's part of what the MBA is trying to do with CAN. That's part of what Mike Nichols and I are trying to do with this book. We're trying to get people to some of that base information where they can say, well, I've got this problem, chapter 14 or whatever. But training is always going to be better. And we suck at that. As an industry, we suck at that. We suck at providing people leadership training. We suck at
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of times it falls on the person who's been promoted to seek out and request the training. And but it also in my experience, when people approach their employer and ask for the funds for that to go through the CAM program or whatever, most people are more than happy to pay for it. So the good news is the resources are there. And a lot of times, your employer will pay for it. You just have to ask and know where to find them. So, but yeah, a lot of times it's on you to
and I
do
think
the job
also it's so hard because in business aviation, especially when you're at a small department, so much weight is placed on the relationship you have with the principal or you're reporting executive and they trust you, right? You're the man. You could or woman, you can do the job if there's an emergency. I got it. And it's like, you don't want there to be any question of your ability, And so it's like this tightrope you walk and if you come to them and you say, I need help or I need to grow in this area, I think pilots naturally are sort of like maybe averse to doing that, where that may be more commonplace in the business world with a typical leadership role. So could be interesting. Now I got a feature request for you, Dr. Broyhill. I love the
feature request.
Yeah, for the AirComp Calculator, if I know most listeners have probably checked out the website aircompcalculator.com, but when you get a report, there's drop downs. You can pick the position and your jet and your location and all these different things. Could we add a drop down to pick out the leadership, like above average, average, or below average, and then adjust the premium there? And you'd be like, well, I'm going to go fly this airplane, but the guy's not a very good leader, so I'm going to need even more to deal with this.
Well, if you could add too the principal difficulty, that would be really helpful too, because
high maintenance, medium maintenance, low maintenance.
Oh, that's so funny. That's so funny. So right now I've got the AirComp Calculator Plus, which does LTI. Maybe I should do the AirComp Calculator Plus that deals with leadership issues.
Yeah. All the intangibles.
That's right.
But I mean, that's honestly, funny. like that would be something I would look at right now if I was going to make an evaluation of going to work for somewhere. Is like, who is the chief pilot, and do I think I can work for this individual? Do I see them as a strong leader? Is that going to be a challenge? Because I could say if your direct supervisor is weak, that would really influence my decision personally. I don't know what you would think, Max, but
for sure. Well, it's similar to like when you're looking at what airline to go to. You look at the contract that's in place, and you see if there's things in there that help in your whatever your situation is, or don't or suit you better at a different airline or whatever. And that's kind of the way it is when you go between corporate flight departments. Is like, the pay is one thing, but then you look at how's the vacation work? How's the days off work? Like, how many days off do I get? What do I get a weekend off? Or like, how do I see my kids' soccer game? Just stuff like that. And but the reality of the matter is in business aviation, that contract is usually, at the behest of whoever the leader is at the flight department at the time, and that those rules can change pretty quick, especially if that leadership position changes. So yeah, that's absolutely. But that's kind of the between the line stuff that you have to figure out between job to job. So
very nuanced.
So on this recently at the last base, I debriefed the results of an organizational culture survey that I did. Because it was just my dissertation for my PhD was safety culture. Didn't have a lot to do with safety culture and that sort of thing. So I'm a pretty keen student of the way organizational cultures work. But the three-legged stool of retention has, basically you've got compensation is one of the legs. Then you've got, the quality of life. Can I plan my life? Can I be at my kid's soccer game? Can I be at my daughter's dance recital? Can I be wherever I want to be? Can I have my anniversary dinner with my wife? Or my husband? And then the last one is organizational culture. And the organizational culture is, do I enjoy coming to work? Do I like being with the people I work with? And by and large, people agreed that if they're going to take a new job, that the culture of the organization is going to be a factor in whether they're going to take the job or not. So they're going to kind of parse through some of the stuff you talked about. So it's kind of the devil is oftentimes better than the one you don't. And I often counsel people, the HR people will say there's more to things like compensation. And they're right, but sometimes the legs of the stool can cross-pollinate in that you can have a great organizational culture and you can have a great quality of life, but you can be paid so low that people think, well, the company's really taking advantage of me. And when they do that, that affects the organizational culture piece because it infects that organizational culture. Because now you're thinking, well, I thought we really had a good organizational culture here. It looks like the company's kind of taking advantage of me. Maybe we don't have some great organizational culture here. So the three legs of the stool don't necessarily have to be discrete, but the organizational culture piece is critical. And you got to make it so people like coming to work. If you're in a leadership position, you got to make it so people like coming to work.
That is well said.
Let's take a time out from our conversation to talk about another friend of ours, Timothy P. Pope, who's a certified financial planner dedicated to guiding professional pilots through smart financial planning. Whether it's saving for retirement, investment management, a seamless military transition, or strategic tax planning, Tim is your trusted financial partner. Join Tim as he leads engaging discussions on personal finance strategies for professional pilots on the Pilot Money podcast. Timothy P. Pope, helping professional pilots make the most out of life.
All right. Dr. Broyhill, in the last episode, Max and I tackled some flight advice. Every episode, we folks write in and with their problems, and we try and give them unsolicited advice. And this one, the most recent one, had to do with comp. And I was just going to run it by you because I bet in all of your work, you have probably seen this scenario. Be curious to get your feedback. Essentially, a pilot put in notice at his employer, and the employer said, "Wait, don't leave," and gave him or her a big raise. And then turns out that the chief pilot found out about this, but the chief pilot did not also get the big raise. And so now you had a line pilot now making more than the pilot in the leadership role. And he said it's become very awkward to work with the chief pilot because of it. Have you ever encountered this? And if so, do you have any suggestions for both the pilot who got the raise and maybe the chief pilot who didn't?
Well, so this is a scenario that occurs often, and I will tell you that there probably were not compensation people involved because compensation people will typically not let this happen. To their credit, I mean, they basically know. So if we bring somebody in that's at the high end of the market, and they're making more than a person in a job grade or a band grade above them, then that's wrong, and they won't let it occur. A rising tide should lift all boats. So if you, from a market perspective, have to pay more to retain somebody in your organization, then you need to pay everybody else more to match, or at least to be compatible. So I've encountered it once or twice. It's a foul when it happens. It used to be like, so when I used to drop bombs in the A-10 or the F-16 and you did something wrong on the range, like went below your minimum release altitude or went past the foul line for straight, they'd say foul 1, foul 2, or whoever you were. So that became the standard term. That's a foul. And it's a foul in this circumstance. So that is on the principle of the person who made that decision, because basically they're giving the finger, if you will, to their chief pilot and basically say, well, this person's really valuable. You'll stick around. I'll take it for granted. He'll stick around and he'll be okay. Yeah, that to our earlier discussion is not a good culture when that happens. So obviously something that should not be done. If you have, there was a flight department that hired me to do a study to look at their compensation ranges, pretty big one. And the reason they did was because they were trying to hire pilots to fill some of the positions for people who had left. And they got very desirable company, Fortune 500. If I said the name, you'd know them. And so everybody said, wow, they're hiring. I'm going to go sign up. So they got to the compensation stage of the hiring discussion. They had some finalists they really liked. They told them what the comp ranges won. Every finalist said, nope, sorry, I'm taken out of here. They lost all of their, and they realized, holy cow, we're not doing something right. But rather than just going after trying to fix and put a Band-Aid on it, they wanted to do the right thing and fix all of it. And that's what it takes. I mean, you've got to fix all of it. You can't just fix one, you got to fix all of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've had some organizations, even some local ones, operators that have said, well, the principal has said, I don't want to give everyone a raise. If I pick, give this guy a raise, I got to give everybody a raise. And so that means that something's got to give. So that means you're going to hire a more inexperienced pilot. And that's, of course, the decision of the owner or the principal. And that is what it is. But, that's the market at work, I guess, the free market at work. But
it is. It is.
And things will always work themselves out one way or another.
Yeah.
It depends on how much training you want to pay for.
Yeah. Well, I've always been a big believer of the hire for attitude, train for experience philosophy, because the what of somebody, the type ratings they may have or other experience they may need, you can put on them, but the who they are, you're never going to change. So, and that works in both ways. You can have the most ultimately qualified person with everything you want, but if they're a jerk, they're never going to not be a jerk.
Yeah.
So if you bring that into your organization, nothing will kill an organization more quickly than a toxic individual in it. And if you bring somebody in like that, you're going to be paying a price.
Well, Dr. Pro, I have a question. So as things, the last few years have been going really great for us as pilots, and from the compensation standpoint, what kind of advice do you give people when they're negotiating their increases in compensation to bring themselves in line with the market, looking forward to a time when things are not going to be so prosperous and maybe there's a decline, and there's pilots on the streets that are willing to then do your job for less, and the backside of the hill we've been climbing here? What kind of advice do you give people, like using some foresight when they negotiate their compensation?
I would just say, don't be greedy. Try to do the right thing, but don't be greedy. I mean, if you can get, for example, if you're paid below the 50th percentile range and you think that you should be paid in the 50th percentile range, you probably should be. But if the raise to get you into the 50th percentile range is going to be maybe 20 or 30 grand, but the one to get you the midpoint of the range is got to be 50 or 60, take the easier bite at the apple and say, in your parting to clip, my wife, the attorney, has a phrase that I've really grown fond of, and that is clear as kind. Don't play games. Speak your mind about what you think is right. And I think the way it works is something to the extent of, like, you're paying me below the 50th percentile. I think I should be in the 50th percentile. I just want you to, as I gain proficiency and experience, I expect to progress up the 50th percentile. I found this great chart. I now include it in the deep dive studies I do as I'm doing my certified comp professional coursework, and talks about where in a range you should be paid based on capability. It basically says if you're new to the role, you're paid at the bottom of the range. You're gaining some experience, you're like on the lower end of the middle. As you become more experiential, top end of the middle. As you become an expert, you're at the top of the range. And I think we kind of need to be realistic in our appraisals of ourselves, and basically say that, if I'm new to an airplane, I only got a couple hundred hours, and I've got somebody else that's got a couple thousand hours in it, or maybe more overseas time or international time than I do. Just be honest about your own resume and your own limitations, and don't think because you can fly an airplane and the airlines can hire you that you're worth 500 grand a year. Something like that.
And then I think that comes into play a lot too with like the low utilization Part 91 flight department, where you fly like 4 days a month kind of deal. And those guys, get pretty proud sometimes. They're like, look, listen, I should be paid at the 80th percentile on this equipment, blah blah. It's like, dude, you do have to take a step back and look at like how much actual work you're doing. And I get, I'm famous for always saying it's not, you don't pay me to fly, you pay me to be available.
Yeah.
Which is, I've said that to a lot of people to help them, owners of airplanes, to help them understand, like, look, this is a different gig than, everybody that works in the office. But that being said,
I have a friend that's a director of aviation, a former director of aviation, and he was kind of having a salary discussion with one of his subordinates. And the guy they fly bigger, sexier iron or whatever. And the guy basically came in his office and said, you need to pay me $450 base, and I don't want to work any more than 12 days a month. And the guy said, you realize with a base salary, you're in the same range as the CEO of the company with a base salary like that. You're in the same range. And the guy goes, this is what you need to pay me. And the guy goes, we're not doing that. And the guy left shortly thereafter. But it's the other piece that pilots need to realize, in fact, all of us need to realize, is there's nothing that'll turn people off more quickly than a sense of entitlement. And if you start getting a sense of entitlement about which you should be paid fairly and competitively, absolutely. But the whole sense of entitlement thing is not going to do anybody in the discussion any good.
Yeah, it's really well said. And we've run into this with some folks that we know that were working for private companies. And I mean, pilot salaries have gone up. There's, of course, but it is starting to clash with the traditional corporate business model where these salaries are going. And you're,
They're getting paid as much as the senior VPs. It's like,
yeah.
The guy,
I don't think they.
and
They
the
don't like
principal's
that.
going, I see this guy in the office every single day. He's there every day. I don't know. My pilot, I see once, once every 2 weeks.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
They're making
exactly.
like it just it doesn't compute, and you can see why it wouldn't compute. And honestly, back to your original point about the high net worth individuals and the poaching, a lot of people are now going to those management companies, I think, because it kind of provides that insulated layer between a direct employee, right? Now it's all just one check you write it once a month, right?
Well, and the other piece of the puzzle is, and when I was leading a flight department, I had the same discussion with my folks, is you generate drama, you'll eventually be managed. That's just what happens, because what will happen is the company will say, you know what? We're done dealing with the drama. We're going to let management company X deal with the drama, and we'll just show up and get on the airplane when the time comes.
Yeah.
They could pay you. They could deal with your bitching about the salary or whatever
Mm-hmm.
and the benefits, and it is what it is. And that is happening. There is a definite trend of flight departments moving to management companies, and a lot of very few high net worth individuals have their own standalone flight departments. Some of them do. But most of them operate their management companies. And because it's just easier, they don't have to deal with the nonsense. And frankly, if there's one thing that I would like to see our industry generate less of is drama, because we are champs at doing that. And I wish we weren't.
It's a good point.
That's why, at the airlines, we don't really have any drama. So
They're just great.
that's
You're just
the good news.
You guys are just so peaceful.
It's just a business aviation thing. I don't think it's the aviation thing.
Dr. Broyhill, you mentioned, I got a complaint with you here. When I go to your LinkedIn profile, I can barely read your name because you got all these letters following in it, PhD, CAM, and then you said you're working on another 3 letters you're going to stick behind your name. I don't even know. You're going to break the whole LinkedIn system. But can you tell us what you're working on and why this is a good thing for pilots?
Sure. I am working on my certified compensation professional credential. I'm doing it through World of Work. I've got 8 courses, 9 courses done, and 2 tests to go, and I'll have it. And the reason is, it provides you the same credentials in compensation world as CAM does or CPA does in other worlds. Basically, if I'm talking to a comp professional, they see those 3 letters after my name, they're going to go, he speaks our language. He knows what he's talking about. And it's not just, it helps me rise from just the pilot guy who does compensation to somebody who has made the effort to understand the whole world of the way it works. And let me tell you, it's been a hugely educational process for me. I mean, I've learned stuff that I had no idea about, and sitting in my pilot chair thinking very self-righteously about this and that, compensation-wise. Then you get into the way they think and some of the things they have to do, and you go, holy cow, there's actually a lot of moving parts here. There's a lot going on. And probably I'd say the biggest takeaway for your listeners that I will tell you is, if you're negotiating with compensation, you're trying to understand it and fix it, base pay structures are really hard to change. Just because of the way they're built and the effort that goes into building, compensation professionals can be much more creative with things like STI bonus and long-term incentive payments as well. So the variable compensation piece allows them to be much more creative in how they solve the issues. But you've got all these pilots across the room to say, no, I just want a salary. Well, guess what? If you're going to work at corporate America based on the structures that corporate America pays with, that's really difficult to change.
And sometimes you can circle that back with the retention piece too, right? By offering, tied to bonuses that happen at certain times of the year and things like that, make people think twice about jumping ship, before the bonus shows up, things like that.
I'm a big fan of that. I'm a big fan of long-term incentive payments where maybe you get stock or you get some kind of a retention bonus and you have to stick around for X amount of time to get it. I think those are fantastic tools, because I think so. If you're going to change a job, So there's always people that are going to change jobs like they change their underwear because that's just who they are. But I think there's a lot of folks that want to get to a place where they like and they want to be able to stay there. But they also don't want to look stupid when they sit down with their spouse at the dining room table and their spouse is saying, you've got X amount of years left in your earning life as a pilot or as a maintainer or whatever. Are you making the financially responsible decision? And we've got to be able, as managers or leaders in business aviation, we've got to make them look smart in that conversation. Yes, and I know I'm not getting quite as much, but they're paying me this, they're paying you this at this point, and this at this point, and it makes financial sense for us to stay. And plus, I like being here, and I like going to work. So it's up to us to do that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's well said. I would be curious, do you have a maybe a few different options that you provide to your clients that when they say, hey, I need some type of a long-term incentive program, are there a few that are very popular, especially when it may be more of a private company or something that, or with a management company where maybe offering like stock options isn't available? Or do you have a few that you recommend?
There are tools. So I don't recommend specific tools because I don't have that kind of visibility. But basically, it's just it's a retention bonus that's paid in the form of cash. Or
Okay.
rather than get paid at the end of the year, you get paid, and maybe it's a 3-year pay plan. You get paid X amount the first year, X amount, 1/3 the first year, 2/3 the
Mhm.
second year, and then the final third the last year. But in each additional year, you get another payment that continues on. So no matter when you leave, you're leaving money on the table. So
Do you,
go ahead.
do you find that like profit sharing programs are helpful with pilots? Because a lot of times they're not instrumental in driving the revenue of the specific company they work for, but but showing them as part of the team and we're all in it together, sort of deal. Do you find that as a good option for the flight department?
Yes, because I think one of the problems we in business aviation have been accused of for years and years is we're operating in our own little silo here at the airport. We're not really engaged with the company. We're not aligned with the company. And if you're working for a corporation, you need to be aligned with the company's culture. You need to be aligned with their values. You need to be aligned with their objectives and having some skin in the game with how well the company does versus your pay is not a bad thing. Whether or not you can, you're supporting the business objectives of the company by flying executives around, obviously. But so you are, in a sense, helping the company achieve whatever objectives they might have. But yeah, I think being tied in and being aligned with the company is a good thing.
Yeah, I think so. Max, I've heard of a few different places where what do you think? Like a profit sharing? You personally, would that be more attractive, or do you like kind of the other model where it's like, hey, the longer you stay, the more you get?
You need to do both, by the way.
Yeah.
You can do both.
Well, obviously it depends on how it's structured because
Mhm.
with the ebbs and flows of the economy, depending on what kind of business you're in,
Yeah.
directly will affect how the profit sharing changes versus if it's a defined structure over time of longevity retention bonus. You have to balance those two things against the variability. But and I would hope that the long-term guaranteed retention bonus probably has less potential of earnings than a something tied to profitability, but there's obviously risk associated
Yeah.
with that side too. So, for me, I'm a gambler. I'd probably take the profit sharing, but
I guess it would depend on what type of company you're working for.
yeah,
too.
that's exactly right. If I was at the,
A home
yeah.
builder in Phoenix.
yeah, well, I played that game once.
Yeah.
It didn't end well.
Woo.
Didn't end great.
Okay, Dr. Broyhill, I have a couple questions for you. You've been a longtime sponsor of the show, and so folks will ask us about you sometimes. And one pieces of feedback that I've gotten from pilots that I've talked to, the question they always have about the AirComp calculator is they say, I don't know where he gets his numbers. I have a big flight department and he's never asked me what I pay my pilots. So how can I think that the salary survey numbers are correct? So
Well-
I imagine you get this question a fair amount.
I do.
Can you
I do.
address this?
I sure can. So I'm a snob about the data that I use. I only use data from the NBA survey and the Gallagher survey. I also use for people that are participants in the IBM Pearl Meyer survey. I use that data as well, but they have to be participants for that to occur. But I only pull data out of scientific surveys. So the NBAA survey, for those who don't know or have been living under a rock for like the last 5 years, is administered by BDO. And BDO, since 2019, BDO is a risk management company. And the survey is run by compensation professionals who are also statisticians. Bad values are audited out of the database. So when largely the data is reported through HR channels, it's not self-reported. Obviously, for smaller organizations, it's still self-reported. But you can, when you look at the way data behave, you can see if somebody's fudging, and it's just by virtue of the distribution of it and the way and the numbers versus the database. So you can tell if somebody, somebody said they submitted value for a line captain at $475,000. They'll generate a phone call from somebody from BDO, and I'll say, "Really, $475,000? Oh no, sorry, I meant to pay $147,000. Okay, thanks." I mean, so that sort of thing will generate questions. So they're very diligent about managing the data. And Gallagher's the same way. Gallagher used to be the Stanton survey. They bought Stanton several years back, and they're very good at what they do. They run a host of other compensation surveys. So does BDO, by the way, in different areas, but their aviation data for our use is very, very good. So that's where the data comes from. I also cross-reference it with data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics and the methodology that I use. So it's all scientifically driven. And here's the kicker. I have never lost a discussion with an HR person that I've explained the methodology to yet. Some of them might argue with the way I age it or regionalize it, typically with the way I age it. But when I explain the methodology of where I get the data from and how I put the data together, they'll say,
So AirComp Calculator isn't calling every flight department to say, hey, you're aggregating data from other places. Okay. Yeah.
I have done custom comp surveys. I have a client in South California who asked me to get as many other operators as I could find in the Southern California area to participate in a local salary survey, and I did that. And let me tell you, the days that if you are, talking to your fellow directors of aviation, your fellow chief pilots at the same field, putting together your own little local comp survey, you are violating federal law. That's price fixing. So the only way you can have a comp survey done is has to be done by a third party who's disinterested, and there are other rules that come with it. So if you're out there doing informal comp surveys with folks in your local area, be careful.
I didn't know that. Interesting. All right. Max, anything else before we get Dr. Broyhill out? We're holding him up. It's a nice Sunday afternoon. There's football on TV. Have the Dallas Cowboys already lost? I don't know.
Probably. Yeah.
Nope.
All right. We will get you out on this. Dr. Broyhill, I know that you're not flying full-time anymore, but I did see a post that you are still occasionally getting into the sky in the Falcon 2000, I believe.
I am. My page may recur in a Falcon 2000 Easy. I've just over 1,000 hours in the airplane, a lot of time in it. Love the Easy cockpit, and used to teach it back in the day. Taught it for a little while. So, just every once in a while I like to get out and fly. And if somebody wants to get a little free cop advice while they're hiring me to sit in the right seat and pull the gear and talk on the radio, I'm happy to help.
That's a Ref plus 5, Sync 700, and you're at the 15th percentile.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly.
Dr. Broyhill, we always appreciate your time, and these check-ins are really valuable. Love the discussion. We're excited for your book. When is your book going to come out? When do they project?
We're hoping it's going to be sometime next year, or hopefully earlier rather than later. We've asked some folks to contribute. We're having to kind of hold their feet to the fire to do that, and that's really the only thing that's slowing us down. So, but we're hoping it's going to be really good work. The chapters I have seen so far have been spectacular. So the level of knowledge it's going to be able to provide for people is going to be fantastic.
Excellent. Well, we're excited to check that out when it comes out. The website is aircompcalculator.com. Dr. Broyhill, we really appreciate your time, and we look forward to our next conversation with you.
Yeah, love being here with you guys. Hope it helps.
Thanks, Dr. Broyhill. Always a pleasure. Appreciate it.
The statements made in this show are our own opinions and do not reflect, nor were they under any direction from any of our employees.